building tomorrow, Sydney. Too bad if you're today. Too bad if you're a tree because you're in the effing way. Too bad if you've got sunshine, you'll soon be in the shade. But it's tomorrow, Sydney, where backhand deals are made. It's tomorrow, Sydney. Get in quick or lose. Hurry up, it's up for grabs, and then go on a cruise. Leave the mess behind you. Look the other way. And don't give a brass razoo what Sydney is today. Too bad for young Aussies. All that's left is crumbs. While smart-ass pigs of progress know that tomorrow never comes.
WestConnex, the biggest toll road we've ever seen.
So I asked around a little bit and then appreciated the scale of the project, which is arguably the largest infrastructure project on the planet at the moment. It's going to cost something around $16 billion, but these are sort of back-of-envelope figures that mean nothing. It'll probably be twice that cost, who knows? Certainly the government doesn't know.
It's forecast to be finished in 2023 at a cost of $16.8 billion. But both now have a caveat that's excluding the impact of potential claims and delays, signalling a possible blowout.
It's become a $42 billion project with tentacles spreading north across the Harbour Bridge to the northern beaches, down south of Sydney. And in its wake, it has been swallowing up people's homes, parks, sporting fields. It's just destroying our lives across the whole city.
The government is still riding roughshod over ordinary people.
The report claims too the $17 billion project was obscured from public scrutiny.
It doesn't have to be this way. This is not normal.
Australian governments, Labor or Liberal, have had a massive addiction to toll roads.
Why build two motorways so close to each other when you have one that's already working, and particularly when this new motorway doesn't serve the airport or the port, which is its whole reason for being.
And the city has been opposed to the WestConnex project since its inception, and since the very first sod turned by Tony Abbott and Barry O'Farrell and followed up by Mike Baird. It is the wrong project and it's the wrong time.
We were there for a year advising government on what we thought should occur with the Transport Master Plan for Sydney and wider New South Wales. And that was all public transport based. But then at some point, these motorways crept into the master plan. And we were suddenly presented with a document that had every single motorway that anyone had ever thought up, pretty much, since about 1948, presented as part of the Transport Master Plan for Sydney.
WestConnex is Australia's largest transport project that will revolutionise the way Sydney-siders move about our great city. The $3.5 billion first stage of WestConnex will connect Parramatta and the City West Link in a continuous 13.5-kilometre motorway.
The backroom deal, which is WestConnex, which is being foisted on us today, not only being foisted on us, we're paying for it, and Transurban will profit.
The city, instead of just opposing this proposal because it was so wrong, we put together a very sound alternative that would in fact take freight to the port and people to the airport. And I presented it to the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. I was very hopeful that she might respond positively. She instead was quite angry that we had put up this alternative and that I might be talking to the media about it, because I think they'd signed up to these and done it secretly to these investors who were, going to make a lot of money out of this toll road.
Did the government give it even a second's consideration? No, it was flatly rejected by Gladys Berejiklian and her ministers. The first time it was presented to her, just a flat no.
The responsibility of the government to be open government is what people in New South Wales want to see. Open government, not secret government.
Like you, I was devastated when I heard last Friday that stage 3 of WestConnex was going ahead. Like you, I had hoped that the government would respond. to the 13,000 submissions in opposition and the growing community alarm about WestConnex. The community is being treated with contempt and the project has been rubber-stamped behind closed doors.
In 2011, Barry O'Farrell won the state election and he decided to set up Infrastructure New South Wales, and he put at the head of that organisation Nick Greiner, who was an advisor to toll road giant Transurban.
They say that we need infrastructure, and we say of course we do, but the planning has to be right. Invite a toll road company to the planning table and the solution is a toll road. That's why in 2023 Sydney will be the most toll road city in the world.
Transurban is getting the super sweet deal. You can't imagine how much profit they will make out of this. They pay $9 billion to get $5 billion of tolls off the existing roads and then billions and billions more off the new stages of WestConnex. Their profits will be enormous.
So the government sold 51% of the Sydney Motorway Corporation, which meant that they sold half of the tolling on the M4, the M4 East, the M4 M5 link, the M5 Southwest and the M5. So every single tolling agreement was wrapped into one and sold, which means that you can't just tear that apart. The government got $9 billion for that. They still have 49% of it.
Well, we hear we can't break a contract. Contracts have been signed. But we know that when it comes to the Rozelle interchange, for example, construction hasn't even begun. So while there may be penalty clauses, the greater penalty and the greater cost is on our environment, locking Sydney into a car-dependent future, on pollution, and the huge impact that we'll see of this construction in the local community.
This is an unfolding environmental and physical and human disaster that we have a responsibility to protest against and stop.
Take a step back and have a look at the real reason they're doing this, at the reason why Transurban invested $9 billion in this useless bit of infrastructure. You see, they're building the biggest toll booth you could imagine, the central station of toll collection.
Transurban's annual report for 2013 contains a wish list that reads like a corporate letter to Santa. Transurban want no government transport policy that might take cars off their roads. They want no competing roads or other means of transport, and they want no exposure to financial risk. Transurban have a reputation for always getting what they want, and that's what they got this time.
Hey, 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 it's a corporate road.
If it's not tied down, let me tell you, they will sell it.
Don't mess with the West.
Great cities have great public transport.
The government said WestConnex is about solving congestion, taking cars off local roads. In reality, cars will push back onto local roads, making rat runs for our suburbs to avoid the tolls.
If people aren't avoiding tolls, this is where they're going to come to the surface and get caught into a traffic jam. If they are avoiding the tolls, this whole road, Parramatta Road, is going to be jam-packed all the way down to Leichhardt and beyond.
Transurban pays no tax. Transurban acquires billions of dollars of income from tolls, and yet, as the owner, it transfers the impacts on health from the pollution coming out of those stacks onto you, the taxpayer.
A scathing parliamentary report attacked the $17 billion project and demanded that smokestacks in all tunnels, old and new, be fitted with expensive filtration technology.
Pollution-free tunnels that residents can use with a clear conscience.
A fresh report has recommended the government install filtration systems into all existing tunnels, ones almost finished like WestConnex, and all future tunnels like the Northern Beaches Tunnel, NorthConnex, the F6 and Western Harbour Tunnel, something the government says isn't necessary.
We think that filtration's not required, will be judged by the science, will be guided
by the science.
Scientific advisory committees, headed by and chaired by the Chief Scientist of New South Wales, when those reports are filled with fabricated and false information.
So what we're proposing, or having proposed for us, is longitudinal ventilation. We push the pollution and the cars and the people along. Works in short tunnels, doesn't work in long tunnels, doesn't work in long busy tunnels. What we need is what's called transverse ventilation, or a system that can recharge and refresh the air in the tunnel at regular intervals so that air quality is maintained. And there's a whole lot of factors: congestion, accidents, understatement of emissions from vehicles that have a high risk of leading to a build-up of pollutants beyond safe levels within the tunnels themselves.
Diesel fumes are 40 times more carcinogenic than tobacco.
Yeah, we have the claim that we're looking at world's best practice ventilation and air treatment, but a cursory examination of what's happening around the world says it's not world's best practice, it's just our practice.
One of the arguments against filtration from the RMS is that we'll soon have electric cars. That's at least 30 years away, and Australia has no plan to get there, whereas other countries around the world do.
The world's in global climate crisis, folks. No sophisticated city in the world is bringing cars into its inner city areas, often single-occupant fossil-fueled vehicles. There are no other cities in the world building insane tunnels and tollways like this into their beautiful, irreplaceable city hearts.
I think what's a real travesty in this country with politicians is that they are not skilled and experienced in the areas of their portfolios. And the people that they should be listening to, the specialists who have all the skills and knowledge, they don't listen to. And if they don't like what they tell them, they totally ignore them.
In 2008, Gladys Berejiklian was incensed the then Labor government was building the same unfiltered smokestacks for the Lane Cove tunnel.
Why won't they allow people to sleep at night knowing that their children aren't inhaling toxins which could jeopardise their health now or in the future?
These communities say her government is doing exactly the same thing.
There's no doubt that communities should be concerned about ventilation stacks. I certainly was in my community.
She can't say one thing before she comes to government and do another thing while she's Premier.
Not a single independent transport expert recommends WestConnex as a transport solution.
Well, the most important thing I want to say about WestConnex is this is a total waste of money. We could achieve so much more for transport for this city. Indeed, you can just in the city if you spent the same amount of money on public transport.
The reason why WestConnex isn't a transport solution or a viable transport option is because when cities get to a certain size, like Sydney, then they become incredibly reliant on their mass transit or their public transport networks in order to relieve traffic congestion. Motorways simply can't do it and they don't cut it. So unless your public transport network, the high capacity network, is operating at a fast speed, you'll never really reduce traffic congestion. So spending all of your capital on a very large and extensive motorway network is just well, frankly, it's a really dumb thing to do, to use a technical term.
We're dealing with fools, people who know not and know not that they know not. I would like to think that there be a review right across the board of our bureaucrats who are well entrenched and have captured the art of fabrication and falsification to hoodwink the respective ministers.
And what we've found in the city of Sydney with the metro is the state government resumes these sites and then hugely upzones them. And so it's profiteering through development on the back of poorly conceived infrastructure.
The state government's record on overdevelopment is really serious. We have done a lot of responsible planning at the city, and instead of working within the controls that we've developed in consultation with the community and business, the government takes the sites out of our control, and it means they can do what they like, go as high as they want to, and the sorts of controls that other developers have to abide by just enable them to have a free go.
The whole case for public transport has been to promote overdevelopment. That's all they've been interested in.
This is a Ponzi scheme for the big end of town, and that's why we're here, to try to stop it.
It's now 4 years since I became involved with fighting WestConnex. It's quite hard to believe, really. I became involved because I knew people who were losing their houses, and all of Newtown, where I live, is affected.
We know now that there are almost 4,500 homes that are subject to this tunnelling program.
When excavation started, 90% of our homes started to crack. They put the cause down to seasonal changes or a dripping garden tap. Before this, our house stood the test of time for nearly 100 years, yet they deny they caused this damage. We are left with bills over hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is outrageous.
This is their structural engineering report with the documents that they used to do that report. These documents have been denied to us for security reasons. Our structural engineering report is therefore incomplete. We're stuffed.
Satellite scans over 3 years show that tunnelling has destabilised ground around the project 7 times wider than predicted.
For 2 years, I've been trying to find out how deep the WestConnex tunnel is going to be under my house. And I've gone to every information session and I've been told every depth from 20 metres to 3 metres.
As residents, you own the land to the bottom of the earth, the centre of the earth, but the government can compulsory acquire that land under your home without giving you any compensation.
I'm nervous. I've still got a lot of mortgage to pay on it. I don't want to be paying mortgage on a hole in the ground.
I'm deeply concerned about the well-being of many residents in these communities who have to put up with constant sleep deprivation and noise pollution, the financial impacts that these people have to suffer as a result of these projects, as well as the disruption of the entire community.
My name is Jacinta Greener from St Peters. We have been bombarded by out-of-hours work. Out-of-hours work starts at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and runs through to 5 a.m. This work has been occurring at both ends of Canberra Street at the same time, bombarding residents in between and leaving no part of our houses as a refuge. Friday morning, while eagerly anticipating the final night of out-of-hours work, we received another leaflet advising of more out-of-hours work this week. Both this Wednesday and this Thursday night from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m, this work will be 3 metres from my bedroom windows. I have been informed I will not be offered alternative accommodation. This work is scheduled both in front of my house and immediately behind it.
So at 11:30 at night, when you're upset about the noise, the process is that you ring a 1-800 number. And if it's an emergency, then they will speak to someone who will call you back within half an hour, but they may not necessarily have actually spoken to anyone who's on the actual project and working there that night. I've had people tell me that they're not using rock hammers. They're definitely not using rock hammers tonight, when it was the hammer attachment to some other device. And that's the thing. If you don't have the technical words, they will pretend that it's not actually happening.
Sorry, I'm getting a migraine.
Basically, we're suffering from complaint fatigue, construction fatigue, consultation fatigue, campaign fatigue.
Together, we've tried really hard to stop it at every stage, and we are exhausted.
This is the beautiful home we had to leave. We thought we were going to spend the rest of our lives there, but no.
Yeah, my home in St Peters was compulsory acquired. We were treated with absolute contempt by the RMS, by their lawyers, their barrister, the valuers, absolutely no consideration for our well-being.
My husband was born there in 1946, and it was devastating to have to leave.
The whole thing is really terrible. This is during a time that RMS made 9.1 billion profit At the time, it had 323 million in the bank, cash at hand, and they are quibbling about a small amount to them, which would be the decent amount of money that I needed to get a house. Real estate agents laughed at me when I told them my budget.
My understanding is that very few people, including businesses, have been paid what their property is worth. And the challenging thing for them then is that they can no longer buy back into the area that they've lived in for 30 or 40 years.
The most unfair part about it was our value was way below, we estimate $500,000 less.
And you take this or you get nothing. And the Premier would have you believe that she cares about the people in New South Wales. The Premier doesn't give a damn about people. All the Premier cares about is getting her project through.
I mean, that sums the whole thing up, the corruption from the government, the lack of empathy, which I would describe as sociopathic, and it has devastated my life, and it seems that no one can touch them.
When it comes down to it, I think we really have to question not only who is this government serving, but have we moved so far away from this very basic principle that governments are there to represent the interests of people?
If motor cars are the solution, then we're asking the wrong question, because what is really needed in a place like Sydney is $16 billion spent on public transport. That's what's needed. But that requires vision, and it requires vested interests not being taken into account. This has all the hallmarks of a bad decision based on poor information, and at its base looms the possibility of massive corruption. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, sadly.
The taxpayers' money is literally being spent on parks being destroyed and trees and homes torn out just to make way for a costly and probably useless motorway upgrade.
Compulsory acquisition of homes, to the destruction of heritage listed properties, communities, the loss of our trees, and the depletion of local democracy and the privatisation of our public assets. Nothing is sacred to Gladys and her cronies.
When the WestConnex Stage 3 approval was announced, and not only did they bury that news for 10 days, but you could not get a single minister or member of the government to comment on the record about the approval. They are now ashamed to be associated with WestConnex, and they absolutely should be ashamed.
Yeah. We live in this beautiful country, but slowly we're destroying it. Corporate greed is destroying our rivers, our rainforests, our cities. What are we going to leave for our children?
We want to start WestConnex.
WestConnex won't work.
WestConnex makes you sick.
We want more trains, less tolls.
Protect the children.
Climate change is already a big problem.
WestConnex would just bring more pollution. We don't want more cars on the roads.
Cleaner and greener future.
Sydney public transport is a train wreck. It doesn't make a scary good sense. And to get from A to B, we're better off walking. Stop those toll road scans and WestConnex. Ditch the Western Harbour Tunnel, the Beaches Link. Stuff the Metro and the evidence.
So Lendlease might be making our lives a misery with construction of this tunnel. But given that the share price has fallen so significantly, there's probably a few senior execs that aren't getting much sleep at night either.
Corporate greed, they'd sell their mothers for a string of beads. We're done talking. Stop those toll road scams and WestConnex. Ditch the Western Harbour Tunnel, the Beaches Link. Stuff the Metro and the Methanet 6. It's your problem, Gladys, fix it. It's your problem, Gladys, fix it. It's your problem, Gladys, fix it.
Evil persists when good people remain silent.